and welcome to the 78th episode of the Tango Banter. I'm Yelizaveta. This podcast has been going on for a while, and recently I've been reflecting and asking myself, what is this podcast really about? And the other day I thought, you've heard that saying, it takes two to tango. It's cliche, I know. But I think as I reflect on all of the topics I've covered, most of them, if not all of them, on some level, have to do with relating to other people. So it's about relationships. It's about what it takes to be in the world and connect and find your place. I'm really interested in this idea of what it means to relate to another person, not just romantically, because I think tango exposes so many other possibilities for relating to other people. And it gives us the space and challenges us to figure it out, to find a way to get along, to solve problems, to resolve conflict. How do we deal with the inevitable messiness that is being among other people? These are the things that tango pushed me to consider for myself. And I think when I boil down all of the topics that I've covered, even though on the surface they're about tango, the deeper desire for me here is to learn to relate to other people better. The other day in one of my live banters that I do almost every Friday inside my private Facebook group, which you're welcome to join once again, somebody said that tango is full of antisocial people. And it really is kind of like that, that tango is a way for antisocial people to be social because it's a controlled environment and you can take it in the doses that you can handle. So I think it's so true that most of us who come to tango don't come because we're super confident and we believe in ourselves as really creative and talented, and we're just looking for ways to amplify our greatness. Most of us come because there's some sort of a desire, a lack of something, a desire to connect and to be a part of something, because we're missing out on some very specific elements in our lives. All of us, I think, share this deep desire to not feel alone, to feel accepted, to be part of a community, to have friends. And social tango is the journey for a lot of people to that place of empowerment. So in a way, for me, tango is this coming of age story for myself and for a lot of other people. And I'm really interested in that story because even though it's perhaps the same narrative, it is very individual. Everybody comes to it in very different ways. And it's been really fun to discover that some people have very similar stories to myself and other people have very different experiences. So it's really a podcast about people coming into their own in a way and finding themselves through tango. And one of these people that I've had the privilege of meeting and dancing with is Stephen Aldaco, who's a dancer here in Los Angeles. And we have been talking for a long time about doing a banter together. We chatted a lot about his journey in tango and how he ended up coming from a background of solo performance style dance like ballet and modern, and ended up becoming a tango nomad living out of his Honda Element, traveling around the city, dancing as much as possible. So I think you will get a real kick out of this banter. Now, real quick, I just want to tell you that I have some travel dates coming up for teaching and DJing, mostly on the West Coast, not much on the East Coast yet. But if you're curious about where I'm going to be in the next few months, you can check out my full itinerary on my website at imsotango.com. The link is in the show notes. And you will also see that this month in August, I'm running a promotion on my private sessions. So if some of you are local and you're interested in doing some private sessions, check it out. The last day that this promotion will run is August 31st. So the info is all on the website. Now, without further delay, here is Stephen Aldaco. Welcome, Stephen, to the Tango Banter.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a long time coming. We've had this conversation
Several months ago.
In the works for a while, and I'm excited to see what this banter is all about.
Me too.
So, to start, I want to learn a little bit about where tango came into your life and what brought you to this dance.
Great question. It started a long time ago. I was 5 years old. Okay. I went to Las Vegas with my parents, and there was a giant Dance Dance Revolution machine. Do you know what Dance Dance Revolution is? It's like the arcade game. You use your feet and you stomp on it.
Yeah, okay.
So anyway, I'm 5 years old and I see these like kids dancing on this arcade game, and I really wanted to try it, but I was like so young and like intimidated by like the big kids were playing like this game, right? But I worked up the courage at 5 or so, and I was like, I'm gonna play this game, and I played it, and I picked like I didn't know what to pick, so they picked a song for me. It was really hard, and I failed in front of everybody. There's like a big crowd watching, and it was a lot of fun, just like to move your feet to like this rhythm game. And
Wow.
Yeah, that was just like a memory I have of like where my love for dance like started, you know.
Wow. I never played that game. I remember seeing it advertised, and I think I do remember looking at it and going, wow, this would be really fun. But there was something that I was recognizing about it. But maybe it is kind of like a great introduction to tango.
Yeah.
Is to tell people that, Dance Dance Revolution, it's like that.
Well, I mean, it's just kind of like moving to the rhythm, and then like in high school, I continued to play throughout my life essentially. And during high school, I couldn't really pay much attention to high school, and I would essentially ditch school every day to go to the arcade to play Dance Dance Revolution.
Wow.
Like I was hardcore into this.
Now, is there like a culture behind this game of like, was there an equivalent of a Milonga where you and a bunch of kids would get together and compete or something? Or?
Not quite, but yes, there were competitions, but yeah, they would kind of surround the game, and there'd be like lines, and you'd put your quarter on the machine to like show your turn, and then there's like it's in a way it's kind of a performance because you have like a crowd of people watching you play as you go and try like your best or your best song or whatever, you know.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so there were probably like the kids who were really good at it, and then the kids who kind of wanted to be good at it.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And so you did this all through high school?
All through high school. And later in college is when I started to study like other forms of dance. I studied like ballet, modern, jazz, all of this stuff. I started really late in life. I was like, wow, 21.
Yeah, that's really unusual especially for a guy.
Yeah.
To like, and I'm curious, did you grow up with automatically this sense of that you can study dance and there's nothing strange about it, or did you have to overcome any sort of fears around that?
Yeah, especially as a guy, like, and growing up in like the hood of LA, you know. I mean, like it was very out of character from where I came from, you know. But
which neighborhood of LA was it?
I grew up in Downey, which is like a nice neighborhood now, but growing up it wasn't as nice, you know. But essentially at that time I was like, kind of a like a chubby computer nerd, and all I would do was play video games.
Wow.
And at
And
some
this is how old?
I was like 20, 21.
Wow.
And at some
Okay.
point
Okay.
I was like, like I'm not going to meet any women playing these games. Like a light
Boom.
bulb went off in my head. I was like, I gotta make a change if I want to meet women. So I was like, okay, I could do yoga, which I did not want to do at that time,
Mm-hmm.
or I could do ballet. There's pretty girls in ballet. Maybe I'll meet some girls doing ballet. But then I just fell in love with like the art form itself, like the difficulty and the technique and everything about it.
Wow.
So trying to meet women was like secondary once I got into it. It was like a discipline, like a martial art in its in a way.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I studied ballet for a little while, and I always fantasized about this idea of studying ballet, of being a ballet dancer, but I always felt like I didn't really get to do that at the age where I could do something with it. You know, you have to start so early to like have any sort of future in it. But I don't think I've ever heard of anybody describing ballet in this way of, first of all, to meet women. I've never thought of it as being a good scene for that, but I guess you're right. And then,
There's not a lot of competition.
yeah. So, I mean, how successful were you?
Oh no.
I mean, I'm curious. Did it
Well,
pay off?
sure, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, a few
Wow.
times, but
Okay.
like
So,
it wasn't. It became not about that at
right.
a certain point.
Right.
It
But
came.
at least you were like, okay, I get that too. So that's not a bad investment of time. You
No,
get both
definitely not.
the thing you were looking for, and also you discover this passion in yourself for dance.
Yeah. So you said that you did do a little bit of ballet growing up.
Not growing up, I also decided that I was going to study ballet later in life. I guess I was probably in my 30s already
Wow.
when I thought to myself, like, why not?
Yeah.
And I took some ballet classes that were just sort of meant for adults, you know, at a studio, like a 6-week beginner class. And then I think as a tango dancer, I sort of had this doubt about myself deserving the title of being a dancer, because I never studied dance in college. I didn't train. So to me, it was like I could only go so far as a dancer until I came up against this wall of like, well, you don't know what it's like in college. So I actually then decided I was going to take ballet in college so that I could see what it's like at that level. And I was really anticipating that I was going to get there and I was going to learn all this amazing stuff, all this new information that dancers know that I might not know. But what I realized is it's the same exact world that I was living in all along, that it's actually not that different. So that's how my journey with ballet was, more of like realizing that ballet is just a dance. It's not like, it's not different from other forms of movement. It's just has a very particular place in our culture, and we attach a lot of meaning to ballet as a form, you know.
Yeah.
But at its basis, you know, in its basic form, it's just a form. It's just a dance. So anybody could do it. So that was my kind of insight with it.
Did you grow up in LA?
No, I did not. I've only been in LA for about 5 years.
Only? It's a long time.
5 years, yeah. But yeah, I actually grew up in Africa, because that's where my dad was working at the time. My dad was a diplomat, so he was stationed in Africa for about 7 years or so. So we were there, and then we came back to Russia in the 90s, and then the Soviet Union fell apart, and then we came to the States.
Whoa.
So it was kind of jumping around a lot. So you're like one of the rare native LA people.
Yeah, are we rare?
It seems like it. It seems like LA people sort of pride themselves that they are from LA.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
I guess when I describe myself, I'm a Southern Californian. You know, that's how I identify myself.
Really?
Yeah.
SoCal,
LA. Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah. So you were studying ballet in your 20s, was there other dances that kind of creeped in
Hmm.
with that? And
Yeah. So as part of like the dance course at the school that I was at, they had you take other courses like modern dance and tap dance and African dance and everything under the sun, you know? And the modern dance really spoke to me. I
wow.
loved modern dance. Just like I also just love the studying the history of like ballet and like modern dance during my college courses and learning how like modern dance was bred because people were trying to break the rules
Mm-hmm.
of ballet. They're like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, you're always pointing your feet, but what happens when you flex your feet, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
taking like these sort of abstract movements and making it like into an art form. And I loved that whole like creative process. I loved being a part of other people's creative process when they would do like choreographies. I
Mm-hmm.
loved being a part of it, and I just like I liked being a little weird, you know, like because you can be a little weird in these spaces,
Absolutely.
and it's okay. It's
Somewhere it crosses over into performance art,
right,
and
yeah.
it's all okay as long as
You,
it's in
yeah,
that
it's in this space.
category.
Yeah, so you can do some, and like when it all comes together on, you see it on stage, and it becomes this whole production, and you see the finished product. You're like, wow, I was a part of that. So, you
Wow,
know, you become like just a small piece in a bigger puzzle,
that's
which I think is
beautiful.
really cool.
And so, how long did this phase last for you?
About 5 years or so. About
Mm-hmm.
5 years, just doing little performances here and there. Um, and I was always against partner dancing. I was like, partner dancing, get out of here with that.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what was it about it that you were so against? What was the
It
thing that you didn't like?
what I didn't at the time, I'm changed now, but at the time, it seemed maybe I was a bit stuck up, but it seemed easy. It seemed
Mm-hmm.
too easy.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was like swing dance, salsa dance, like I can learn that in like
Mm-hmm.
easily, like in a day. I can pick up, I could learn the dance. And it wasn't the same with like ballet and modern. You have to like train your body to get to a certain level to actually,
Mm-hmm.
you know, use it. Um, but I did go to swing dancing nights eventually, and I enjoyed it. I just like, okay, this is a fun way just to like let loose, have fun, and like connect with people. So I did swing dance for a good 2 years.
This was also at the college.
No, this was at a Atomic Ballroom. Shout out
Oh,
Atomic Ballroom.
shout out Sonic Dolphin, yeah.
That's where I started tango,
Oh,
actually.
wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
So what happened is for 2 years, I was dancing swing dance,
Mm-hmm.
and in the room adjacent of this big ballroom, there was tango, and I always knew there was tango in this room, but I never decided to actually like venture into that
Mm-hmm.
room. I was like, I don't care about tango, whatever. But one day, I decided just to kind of like poke my head in and like, what's going on in there, see what it's all about, and then I see like people like dressed up
Mm-hmm.
and they have their like their suits and their jacket, and there's like women in these like beautiful dresses, and it's sexy, but it's not like raunchy. Like I would
Mm-hmm.
describe like bachata or salsa. They're not like grinding up on
Mm-hmm.
each other. It was like it was sexy, but it was elegant at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, whoa, like, what is this? And then the music, I'm like, what is? I've never heard anything like it, you know. So I went back the next Friday and I took a class with Joe Banks. He was a
Mm-hmm.
teacher in Atomic Ballroom. And then I noticed a lot of the similarities where it's like, I'm just trying to walk. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just trying to walk forward. But I had that same difficulty I found in ballet where it's like, I'm just trying to point my toe, but there's so much technique in just trying to
Mm-hmm.
point your toe. So then I was like, maybe I like the challenge. I don't know.
Mm.
But I decided to like pursue it because it was so challenging, you know?
Wow.
Yeah.
Key words there. Because it's so challenging.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've noticed that consistently when I maybe talk to people or think about who are the people who really stick with tango, who really penetrate it and really get into it. A lot of times it's this quality of really loving a challenge, loving
Mm.
the process of problem solving or developing abilities that you don't have yet, like that challenge of going through the process.
It
That's
definitely
really interesting.
it definitely attracts a certain personality type, I think.
Yeah. So now it's been how many years that you've been dancing tango?
Let's see, 25, I'm 34, 9 years.
Nice. And do you dance anything else at this point?
No,
Tango has
no,
just
no.
really.
So at that time, I was still sort of dancing ballroom and like ballet and modern and stuff. And then once I tried tango, I was like, okay, 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 this is the one. Like if I want to be good at a dance, I'm gonna hyper focus on this one particular dance, and that's it. Like I dropped all the other classes. Like, okay, this is the one where
Mm,
I felt most like aligned with
hmm.
when I danced it. And
As in, it resonated the most with who you are
yeah,
deeply.
yeah,
Like, there's something about it that, like, you are a reincarnated milonguero from the 30s, and you found your way back to tango, kind of
yeah. And
feeling.
you mentioned it way earlier. It's like, did you struggle like doing like ballet like as a man?
Hmm.
And yeah, I did. I
Hmm.
did. There's a stigma, especially in the
Interesting.
States. Like he's a man dancing tango, so he must be homosexual or something,
Uh
And
huh. You mean
uh,
ballet?
ballet. That's what I meant to say.
Yeah.
There's a
Wow.
lot of like stigma and stuff like that. But when I danced tango, I was able to feel like very like in my masculine. You know what I mean? I could feel
Oh,
like a I could
different.
feel like a man, and and it was great. I was like, oh, this feels so right. It was more of a feeling for me. It was like
Yeah.
this feels right. This feels
Yeah.
right, and yeah, it was different because I maybe this is my own thing, but I felt maybe a little bit of shame like around
Mm.
my ballet dancing. Like I loved it, but I know the perception of how people would think about me, and that was difficult
Wow.
to like deal with, But with tango, I'm like, oh yeah, hell
It's
yeah,
the opposite.
I'm a yeah, I can say I'm a tango dancer and be like super proud of it.
Do you feel now that the ballet work that you did influences tango, how you dance? What are some of the
Yeah.
things that you notice?
Well, I had to unlearn a lot of things for sure. Like
Oh.
some of it does translate, like the extension, and if
Hmm.
I was to ever like perform, a lot of that performance um, training like comes
Hmm.
into mind, like where the audience is and all this sort of stuff. But like tango's a very like grounded dance, like really
Hmm.
like connected to the floor, and you have to like use the floor for a lot of things.
Hmm.
And then ballet, yes, you use the floor, but you're very like lifted, you're like
Yeah.
very up, you're always up all the time. So I really had to like unlearn that part of my dancing where I had to be like much more grounded as opposed to being like always up and lifted, and you
Hmm.
know but
Yeah. That's interesting. I It's something I talk about actually in classes or whenever I talk about posture, and I try to give people a sense of what it's supposed to feel like. I do talk about ballet as being the example of that one extreme where it's like you're as lifted as you possibly can, and it's all
right,
about sort of being weightless. And then on the other extreme, you might have something like African dance that's super grounded,
super,
hips are super relaxed,
yeah,
knees bent, and it's very kind of low to the ground. And if you were to think in terms of those graphics that they make of evolution where it goes from like ape to
yeah,
human being,
I do, yeah.
I think about dance in that way. And you can have, like, on the one extreme you have the African dance movement, and on the other extreme of evolution you have ballet,
Sure,
right? And
yeah.
tango is somewhere on the continuum
Mm.
between those 2 points. But in my mind, it's a lot closer to that African sort of posture and
Sure,
groundedness than it
sure,
is to ballet, even though now what we might see on stage or in performance will be a little closer to the ballet sort of feeling of that line and extension exaggeration, but it's more for stage. I think for social tango,
yeah.
it is very much closer to that African dance alignments and the movement quality.
So now I want to ask you, because you lead, right? So as
Mhm.
a female who leads, how has that been for you?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting journey. And somewhat, I guess I've experienced somewhat of the similar emotions that you might have gone through by being the only man in the ballet class. I definitely have felt those types of things where I'm the only woman who's leading, or I'm in a class and there's a shortage of followers, and leaders are expecting me to just step into the follower role just because I'm a woman, and that I don't have the right
Mm.
to the limited resource of followers because
Mm.
of that. So I'm aware of certain dancers not dancing with me because I lead, or not taking my dance seriously because I lead, or looking at me in a certain way when I'm on the dance floor next to them, and sort of kind of giving me this dirty look of some kind. Like I've had those experiences, um, but I think the culture has really changed over the past, at least post COVID for sure. There's been, I think, more of a amplification of a shift post COVID, because I think people are just tired of sitting around and waiting. So there's been more women leading, and that's kind of normalized. And so now it feels pretty cool. I have a lot of respect from a lot of leaders, give me a lot of support and encouragement and compliments. So for the most part, I feel pretty lucky that I can lead, and it's fun to be that person who's like the odd person. Oh, she's a woman. She's like at the championship, especially. It was pretty interesting
Mm-hmm.
because people kept getting confused with like where to put me, because even the announcer like announced it incorrectly because she thought it was a mistake that there was like
Right,
two
right.
women
Yeah.
names next to each other. Anyway, so I do feel like now there's a bit more of a pronounced shift toward normalization of women leading. So it's been fun for me now, but at first it was pretty tough for sure.
Follow-up question. So, did you experience that everywhere you went, or specifically in like LA area where I assume you mostly dance?
By the time I got to LA, I think I was already pretty established as a leader. Mm, I don't know if that's actually true. I just feel like by the time I came to LA, a lot of people knew me, and I already had a lot of friends. So it was actually funny because when I moved to LA, I was in this phase where I was like, I quit tango. Meh, I don't want to dance tango anymore. I was like done with it. It was the time I came back from Buenos Aires. I gave up wearing heels, and I was sort of fed up with the whole scene. So I moved to LA, and I was in this phase of just kind of trying to discover what I wanted to do now. And I didn't want to do tango. And it was because people already knew me. So once they found out I was in LA, people were so excited about me being here. And that's actually what kind of brought me back out, because I didn't have to do that labor of establishing myself in the
Mm-hmm.
community, which I've had to do that several times. And it's difficult, when nobody knows you. So by the time came to LA, it was pretty smooth sailing, I should say, compared to. But the toughest part was leading in Buenos Aires. That was the biggest test. And I did lead at Salon Canning one night, and I thought I was going to shit my pants. I was so nervous. I was, because the time before when I came to Buenos Aires and I saw two women leading at Salon Canning, I was like, oh my god, what's going to happen? Are they going to kick him off the dance floor? It was like a big deal back then. So I think Buenos Aires is probably the only place still that has more of that difficulty. Like if I go to Buenos Aires, I think about that right now for myself. Like when I want to go to Buenos Aires, for example, I'm not going to be able to go to El Beso because I don't wear heels.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I'm not going to be let in, and he's not going to allow me to wear flats and dance as a leader. Like I'm pretty sure that's going to be a limitation. And I'm not going to make that compromise. Like, I'm not going to dance in heels,
Yeah.
you know? So, yeah.
What I mean, when I went to Buenos Aires, I was scared to dance at Salon Canning too. I mean, like it's intimidating for sure. It's like
Yeah.
it's so
Yeah.
packed, and it's the
The
whole experience.
historic part of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I ended up when I was there, I ended up gravitating to different spaces, and
Yeah.
I think you find
Yeah,
your like.
exactly. I'll just have to find a new crowd.
But I find it so fascinating that even within like just like tango dancing, there's like there's the one milonga where you go like all dressed up and you wear a suit, tie, the whole shebang, and then there's other places like I'll just say like locally Oxygen Tango or something. You're just like you
Hmm.
can show up and like
You can wear your
you wear
pajamas.
your pajamas and just be comfortable and like.
Yeah. You can still have popcorn on your t-shirt from snacking earlier and you can show up totally.
But
Yeah.
I personally like that vibe better because I
Which one?
like the more
More
relaxed,
relaxed, yeah.
like the afternoon sort of situation.
Yeah.
There's a time and a
Yeah.
place, you know.
Totally.
But like if I wouldn't want to do it every week. Like it's just it seems like a lot to me to like go out, get dressed up, do the whole
Oh,
thing.
yeah. Yeah, it's a commitment
It
for
is.
sure. You
Yeah.
know, one thing I was mesmerized by this when I went to Buenos Aires, especially when I was there for 6 months. I really got to kind of see it over a long period of time. I got to go to the same Milongas, and I was like on a schedule, same Milongas every week. And it was interesting to see the seasons and the people and what they're wearing. And I particularly noted the culture around Cachirulo, Milonga, and I would go and I would see the same people and they would sit at the same tables. They would wear the same things, you know, and you just kind of see this rotation of Milongueros and their partners. And so I spent 6 months there and then I left. And of course, I had this feeling of longing. I wanted to be back there, which I think is a common feeling for people when they first go and they come back and you're like, oh, I want it. I want it. I want it. So then a few years later, when I go back, I go to the same Milonga, you know, and I swear to God, that first night, I remember sitting down and it was the same people wearing the same clothes, like the same dresses, the same haircut. And it had been like 5 years. And it just felt like, wow, it's really this world that is almost like this parallel universe that never changes. That world is always there. You can
Yeah.
always just put your dress on and go there and it's timeless. It feels so interesting. And for them, you know, I'm just a speck on their timeline. These people have been coming to this Milonga for 30 years, sitting at that same table. And I think that's a very beautiful aspect of their culture. They really live for it. I mean, they they have to get up at 7 in the morning and they'll still go out and dance till 4 a.m.
I don't know how they do it.
You know,
Yeah.
and they'll do it into their
It's the
60s and
mate. It's all the mate.
they'll drink their mate, they'll be eating their uh, you know, del dulce de leche and their media lunas and I you know lived that lifestyle for 6 months and it destroyed me. Like
Yeah.
it literally destroyed my body, my mind,
Your
and
heart.
my heart. And the reason why I'm saying this is that I'm kind of realizing that it's not the same for us as Americans dancing tango.
No way.
You know what I
No.
mean?
Oh, no way.
It's kind of like when I was a yoga teacher, the equivalent of Buenos Aires for a yogi is India, of course.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing. And
Right.
people really crave to go to India and practice in India because they believe there's something there that's more pure, more authentic, more real, more whatever. But in the end, it's like, no, it's not your culture. Like it's not your
Yeah.
thing. You are not Indian. Like you just cannot understand the culture in the same way. So with tango, it's similar that it doesn't work the same way in our communities. It has a very different purpose. People have a very different level of commitment.
Yeah.
You know, we're not going to be staying up till 4 a.m. 3 days in a row and then going to work.
No.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm just not going to do that.
When I went for a similar reason because I wanted to discover like where it's from, what it's all about, and like kind of live the life a little bit. And I remember like going in the soup day and just like seeing like people carrying their like instruments,
Hmm.
through the city, and I'm like, oh, this is crazy. And you like walk into
It's tango.
right, yeah, you walk into a store and there's like tango music playing. You're like,
Yeah.
what the hell? This is crazy.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
you would never find that here,
Yeah.
maybe in small little restaurants or whatever.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's like
Yeah.
it's not our lived experience.
No.
Not like
No. And I
how.
mean, it's fine that we're borrowing from it. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's more that it's really, I think sometimes I observe this debate about whether what's being danced here is the real tango. And if it's, it's more real there, it's more authentic there because that's where the culture's from. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. But tango is bigger than that. Like it has its own identity in our communities. And something that you said earlier that was exciting for you in modern dance was this feeling of discovery and innovation, of this opening up the box and saying like, oh well, I always point my toe, but here I can actually flex my toe. And that's a frontier that I think is much more available to people who can think outside the box. This is kind of what I'm looking for as a dancer, is equivalent of that, because I see tango as a blueprint that's there. It's like, this is the system of movement, here's the rules, right? But now, what can you do with them?
Hmm.
You know. Now, one thing we haven't talked about, and I really am curious how that relates to your whole journey of dancing, both in ballet, modern, tango, is sailing, and
Mm.
how that, what part that plays in the picture of your exploration, because it seems like there's a connection there.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't have much experience. I did it for one summer. One of my yoga students was just like, "Do you want to learn to sail?" And I was sure, like let's give it a try. And I'm thinking like, all right, we're gonna get my, gonna put on some nice shirt. We're gonna sit back, relax, sip some wine. Like this is my original thought of what sailing is, you know?
More like reclining on a yacht
Yeah,
while sipping on a martini.
yes. So
Yes.
this is my thought going in, and I show up to the marina, and it's like this small, like 14-foot boat, and it's like pissing rain, and there's like a
Oh my
bunch. There's so much
gosh.
wind. It was the windiest day I've ever sailed in. The first day out, and I don't know how to sail at all. And he's like, "Okay, we're doing a race." He didn't tell me it was a race. We entered a regatta the first day I went sailing,
Wow.
and it was absolutely crazy. It was like pissing wind, and like I was trying to pull ropes, and he's like yelling at me to like, like port side, port side. I'm like, what the hell is port side? I don't know what that means yet. It was a crazy experience, but it was really fun and exciting.
Wow.
But how that relates into tango is like there's this moment when you're sailing and you're like holding the sail, right? I could picture it. I'm like holding the sail, right? And you've got this like little tail like string basically, and it's like waving in the wind, and your goal is to get that string to just flow evenly with the wind, right? If it's
Mm.
flowing like this or it's down, you're not really catching the wind.
Hmm.
So the wind's blowing and I'm taking the sail and you're just like kind of moving it out, and it's like very subtly, like it's just
Wow.
like a little bit here, a little bit there, and there's a moment where the string just goes, and it's just like perfectly aligned, and that's when you've got like the perfect wind. But the wind
Mm.
isn't like a static thing, it's going to move, so you have to like move with it, you have to like find it again, and you have to keep finding this like perfect angle to hold the sail at. And it's very meditative
Mm.
because I can't focus on anything else. Like my
Hmm.
job in that moment is to get that string to flow straight. He's guiding the boat. It's a
Hmm.
two-person situation. So he's guiding the boat. He's telling me like if other boats are coming, and I'm just like focusing on this. And right, it's like if I'm dancing with a partner, I'm like trying to feel. their feet. Like where are her feet on the ground? Like is she forward on her way? Is she back on her way? Where is she planted? And it's like little tiny adjustments. Like, oh, she's kind of back. Let me like pull her, not pull her. Let me guide her slightly forward a little bit. It's like, okay, now she's like really on her weight. So now I know I can make this other like slight, maybe like a weight change, and like very subtly. And then okay, now I feel that she's changed her weight, so I can move on to the next step. Where both of those activities, I'm like hyper focused on something. You know, when it's sailing, it's the wind. When I'm dancing, it's like the partner's weights and where they're at.
Wow.
Yeah.
That makes me want to start sailing. That was such a wonderful description. Very successful image there. I really appreciated that.
I hope you guys appreciate it too.
I'm curious, this idea, it makes sense when you're talking about you're involved with something that directly you're feeling in your body. So whether it's the sail or another person, is there a connection to, if you think about your ballet dancing or what you do as a dancer in solo movement, is there something that you can say that you're watching in a similar way or that you're paying attention to in a similar way that's like a similar space for your solo movement?
So when I'm practicing solo movement, is there something that brings me into that space of like meditation a little bit?
Yeah, like what, because I understood the connection between the sailing and tango, and I'm just curious if there's a connection between sailing and ballet or modern.
Yeah, if we take like, let's just say like the performance aspect of like modern dance is what comes to mind first. It's like you do have all these rehearsals, right? And usually in these rehearsals, like you're choreographed to counts, right? So you got, in modern dance it could be weird. It could be 1 2 3 5, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, then back to one, and you have all these counts in your head, and you're just like listening for these like subtle cues in the music. And for me, I would count. I would count the whole performance of like, okay, my I'm like counting in my head like when is my time to like pop out on stage or to do this particular movement. But you practice it so much. There's like rehearsals and rehearsals and rehearsals, and you just by the time the performance comes, you kind of know it, right? So when that performance moment happens, you don't have to think about it as much. So I'm just focusing on the count. I'm like, okay, this count is happening, so I need to move my arm or move my leg at this time on this count. So that is when it becomes like a meditation. But that takes like work and practice and like memorization to like get there.
Wow. Yeah, that's the thing that actually I think makes me most nervous about solo dancing. Any kind of movement that it requires choreography and memory of counts, or putting movements together, makes me really nervous. And I remember in ballet class, of course, it was the away from the bar is when I wanted to just leave the class. Right?
Across the floor, you're like, oh man, here we go. Like,
and
you want me to
especially
what?
when you kind of have this feeling like, okay, I kind of know this at the bar, plie. Okay,
Right.
I got that. I got my backbone. I got, and then all of a sudden, somehow, that is supposed to become a part of this sequence. Whatever you're doing here is now supposed to be a choreography of steps, and the brain just goes like alarm, nothing there.
Oh yeah.
And it's pretty scary. And I'm sure it's kind of the same in everything that you start. And when it's first, it's new, and you have that feeling of like, oh my God, how am I going to survive this? But
Question for you. So when did you start dancing? How long have you been dancing?
So I started tango in 2009.
Okay.
And before that, I didn't really have any dance experience, but I did a lot of yoga. So I became a yoga teacher when I was about 21. And just yoga was like my first movement love. I just fell in love with it immediately. and it healed my body. And then I kind of got into this addictive space with it that, you get kind of like a junkie with yoga as well. It's kind of the same thing. You're
Yeah.
chasing that high.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
I had many years of that. And I think it was yoga was my entry point into dancing. I couldn't imagine myself being a dancer. I didn't feel like I was a dancer. I deserved to be a dancer. I had all this stuff I kind of carried with myself through childhood, like believing that since I'm not trained, I don't get to be a dancer. So I was doing yoga for a long time, and I got to this place where I understood the form. I perfected the form. I got all the poses. I understood how to teach it. I kind of like knew it inside out. I studied philosophy. I studied Sanskrit. I studied meditation. And I studied different types of meditation and yoga and all that. And then in 2009 is when I got introduced to tango. And at that time, I felt like yoga was sort of getting boring because I felt like I didn't have that artistic expressive outlet that I was needing, and dance was a way to get it. And so that's when tango came in, and at that point that's when I started. And most people thought, when they would dance with me in the beginning, they thought that I was a dancer already, which gave me some kind of confidence and being like, oh, I'm kind of good at this. So that sort of kept me in. And then I started actually really exploring all the dances and kind of got into the fusion scene and contact to improv,
Ooh,
ecstatic
contact
dance,
is fun.
like, yeah, all of that. When I was living in Portland, I basically had this 5-year period of just immersing myself in dance and dancing all the time, every day, of different kinds, going from fusion to tango to house party afterwards to whatever. So I was like, I was sort of absorbing all that energy that I missed out on, I think, from my childhood, when I actually wanted to do dance but I didn't get to
Right.
because I was just too old. By the time I was 7, I was too old to start ballet.
Yeah.
So
So I want to make a quick comment on that. So I had a ballet teacher. Her name was Marie Delapalme, rest her soul. She said this one time. She said this like one little nugget, and it was like, everybody is a dancer, right?
yeah.
Like, doesn't matter if you're like 50 and like like massively overweight, or if you're like 30 and just learning how to dance. Like, there's everybody has a place
Mm.
in dance. You don't have no Not everyone is going to be this like elite top performer or whatever, and I think that's especially true in tango. Is like, there's all sorts, right? There's like the milongueros who just do their thing every week, and there's the weirdos like us who like really like dive into it and like try to understand it, and there's people who
Yeah.
are like bred doing it essentially,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think there's a space for everybody in tango, you know.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
And to your point, of all the dances, I think, and I'm preaching to the choir here, I
Yeah.
know, but of all the dances, tango is the most accessible in certain ways because, swing and salsa can become too energy demanding as
Yeah.
you get older.
Yeah.
Ballet, of course, is not really that accessible to older people. So when it comes to the highest possibility of like doing a dance and continuing into old age, it's like tango really checks out in so
Yeah,
many ways.
it really
And
does.
it's inspiring, I think, to see it play out because you really get to meet people that you would never think were dancers. But I wanted to just spend a little bit of time talking about your project, your podcast,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
if you wouldn't mind sharing your vision for your podcast, I would love
Yeah,
to know
yeah,
that.
for sure. So I have a podcast that's called In My Element, and essentially the idea is we're talking to people who live in their element. So, well, I actually live in a Honda Element, right? And one of the reasons I chose to do this is so I can like focus my energy and time to like tango dance essentially, right? So I can like go to the Milonga and just like sleep in the back of my car.
I
Like,
did not, I don't think I knew that about you,
really?
that you actually live in your tango element.
Yeah, I really do. Yeah. So yeah, so I live in this like little like SUV car situation,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, one of the reasons I do that is because like if I go to LA to dance at a Milonga or whatever, then at night I just find somewhere to sleep and I park it somewhere and I wake up the next day and I go to the gym and teach yoga and shower and just do my other stuff. And
Wow.
but originally I did it because I wanted to go to Argentina for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, I need to save money to go to Argentina. I was like, how am I going to do this? I'm like, all right, well maybe if I just like live in my car for a little bit, I can save the money to go and do it. And then I found myself just going like back and forth between work and milongas and all this stuff, and I was never home. I was like, what's the point? Like, there's no point in
Mm-hmm.
like keeping a home. So I'm just gonna live very minimally out of this thing, so I can focus all of my attention and time to like living or to dancing tango essentially.
Wow.
But anyway, so the podcast is about people who live in their element, like physically like live in their Honda elements,
Mm-hmm.
but then also it's a play on words because we can talk to anybody who lives in their element, right? Someone who's like
Oh,
a
cute.
very like in whoever is like a tango dancer, or someone who's very passionate about like rock climbing or
Gotcha.
any sort of other thing.
Nice.
So it's going to take place in my second Honda element, which is being converted into like a mobile podcast studio,
Wow.
essentially.
So you now have two elements for two different purposes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm imagining an army of elements spread out all over, and then you might be traveling around and you'll have a portable dance floor and you'll just bring them along with you.
Right. We could just like pull out the dance floor, just stick it on the ground somewhere.
Yeah, I've had that fantasy of like getting a little van and just going from city to city and
Yeah.
meeting up with people, stringing up some lights and having a little roadside milonga.
That's what I just did. I just came back from Montana,
Mm-hmm.
and I went up with a bunch of my Honda Element friends, and we all went to this big meetup where there's 207 Honda Elements at this big gathering. It's this whole thing. It's a thing. It's like the Volkswagen Bug, but Honda Elements essentially.
Wow.
Anyway, when I was up in Seattle, I was like, well, I'm here, so I'm going to dance. So I
Yeah.
danced in Seattle, and I came down. I danced in Portland on the way down back to LA.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's the way to do it.
it's great.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And how big is this community of element owners? Is this like in the thousands?
Definitely. Yeah.
Wow.
Definitely. Yeah.
So it's like a whole culture.
It's like a
behind
whole
it.
it's a whole thing.
Do they still make Honda
No,
Element?
they
And
don't.
that adds to the cult status.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they don't make them anymore. That's fantastic.
It's very interesting. But it's
Wow.
fun.
Wow.
So in my element on YouTube, you guys can look up the podcasts.
Yes. Anything else from you, Stephen? Are there any parting thoughts or
Yeah, I
questions?
just had one question. It's kind of like, what is how has like the tango, this is what I want to get to. How has the tango scene changed for you since you started to where you are now?
Since I've started in 2009?
Yeah.
Well, I want to say it's changed for the better overall. I feel like it's grown quite a bit. There's definitely more demand, more tango in general, more events. There's a lot more resources. It's much easier to learn tango now than it was when I was first starting. There's just more information, more examples of good tango. When I first started, it was like, I think there was like 3 videos on YouTube or something. Like it was just so minimal. There's so little. And I felt very confused for a long time. So I think accessibility to it and overall number of teachers and classes, all of that has expanded, which is great. I think what hasn't changed much that I very much want to see changed is the image of tango that's portrayed to the public, to people who don't know about it. It's still
the red rose and
yeah, I mean, it's still it's fascinating that of all the changes and developments that's happened in terms of like how many professionals there are and teachers and classes that it's still very traditional image of it that's being put out. But also there's been this sort of like expansion and contraction going on. When I came to tango, we were just on that at that moment of like contracting away from all the nuevo energy, because nuevo came in the 90s and then it all kind of exploded and everybody was doing nuevo, and I came in and there was just this like lashing back against that and making it a little bit more conservative again. And so we've been writing on that for a while.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
just been like conservative, conservative, conservative. And now, just in the last maybe year or so, like post COVID, I feel like there's starting to be this other wave of people who are interested in experimenting, and I'm hoping to see, you know, what comes of it, and I want to definitely contribute to that for sure. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
This was really fun.
Yeah.
Thanks for rolling with it, with all the punches.
Make sure you guys subscribe, thumbs up.
No, I need to say that every time.
You don't have to, but people will do it because
yeah.
they don't know. They forget to do it. So if you just say,
don't forget to do it.
That's all. If you want to support, it's,
Yeah.
it's an easy, like low effort way to support. It's like, boom, subscribe and thumbs up so people can see it. It helps the algorithm grow and helps you grow and brings more awareness and attention to tango in general.
Wow. I really appreciate your support.
Yeah, 100%.
Awesome.
Namaste, dude.
Namaste.